CGS initiated this study 4 months ago, and now today we are proud to present our culmination of efforts. Professor Dr. Ali Riaz, a distinguished professor at Illinois University, State University, USA, and a member of the advisory board of CGS, served as the principal investigator of this study. Working alongside with him and under his supervision, a dedicated research team from the CGS contributed immensely to this study. We are honored to have Dr. Riaz with us today. Our distinguished speakers include prominent personalities in the field of the human rights in Bangladesh. We are privileged to have Dr. Kamaluddin Ahmed, Chairman of National Human Rights Commission, Advocate Jairai Khan Panna, Chairperson of the renowned human rights organization Aino Salish Kendro, prominent journalist Mr. Nurul Kabir, editor of New Age, and Barrister Sarah Hussain, Honorary Executive Director of BLAST. Now, I request Mr. Julur Rahman, the Executive Director of the Center for Governance Studies, to invite our esteemed speakers and the Principal Investigator to the stage, please. Thank you. Let us begin by welcoming Mr. Julur Rahman, the Executive Director of Center for Governance Studies. With his dedication and vision, CGS has made significant strides in the promoting research and understanding the realm of the human rights. Without further ado, let us hear his opening remarks.
Thank you, Roman. Assalamu alaikum, namaskar, and good morning. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today the results of our most recent study that our team at the Center for Governance Studies has been working on under the leadership of the esteemed Dr. Ali Riaz, distinguished professor at Illinois State University, USA, and a member of the advisory board of the CGS. Our study focuses on human rights, or more particularly, human rights defenders of Bangladesh. The notion of human rights is plainly understood today as every human being, by the very fact of being born as a human, is entitled to enjoy certain rights individually as a part of a community, irrespective of gender, caste, skin color, religion, or creed. However, violation of these fundamental rights is an issue that is present in almost every country on earth. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 was created in recognition of the constant battle to protect human rights worldwide. The United Nations Human Rights Office is a United Nations department specifically created to promote and protect human rights guaranteed under the Universal Declaration. However, other than the UN, many individuals and non-government organizations have also taken on the mantle of defending human rights on various national and international scales. For our study, we classify human rights defenders as those individuals who gather and report human rights abuses, endeavor to stop such abuses, and ensure that everyone has access to their universal rights. I believe that how we judge the human rights condition of a country can most easily be determined by how the country treats its human rights defenders. Through our study of human rights defenders of Bangladesh, we are faced with the unfortunate reality that the state of human rights is indeed declining in Bangladesh. The evidence of human rights violations in Bangladesh is clear to all those who have eyes. Bangladesh has already received several warnings from the United Nations and a sanction from the United States of America due to the grounds of human rights abuse. However, instead of trying to identify and solve the problems of our country, those in power have opted to point fingers at the problems of other countries and sometimes even flat out refuse to believe that human rights issues even exist in Bangladesh. This kind of denial and deflection is an indication of the state-sponsored nature of human rights abuse in Bangladesh, a reality that will become much more obvious as we explain our key findings of the study. Therefore, I'll not take any more of your time. I thank Professor Ali Riaz and his team for their extraordinary efforts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Executive Director, for your words and for setting the tone for the event. Now, it's my privilege to request Dr. Ali Riaz, the principal investigator of this study, to present the summary of the report.
Thank you, Roman. Thank you to Center for Governance Studies for giving me this opportunity to speak today, and particularly holding and organizing this study. It has been a great experience over the past 4 months with respect to conducting this study. I had a wonderful team working with me. I deeply acknowledge and thank them for their endless and ceaseless effort over the past 4 months. We have faced enormous difficulties, yet we have been able to gather the information and present it today. What I'm going to today is basically highlight some of the features, some of the findings that we have gathered in the past 4 months study. The report itself is rather a little bit long. Nevertheless, it is available in print form and soon to be uploaded in the Center for Governance Studies website. I hope you'd be able to take a look at it. And as I said, I deeply acknowledge my research assistants, Romanuddin, Zubaida Huna Farooq, Apan Jahid, Mahbub Rahman, and Dola Dash for their efforts. The survey that we have done is about the human rights defenders. As Zilur has already noted in his opening remarks, that the state of human rights in Bangladesh seems to be worsening. And it is not only the Center for Governance Studies' position, but most importantly, if you read the international reports coming out from the US State Department, for example, definitely Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and others, that it has clearly documented with enough and sufficient evidence that the human rights situation is increasingly reaching to a dire situation. Those who are working here in the human rights field have repeatedly noted that there are instances of many kinds of egregious violation of human rights in this country. However, this report is not about the state of human rights, rather an issue which has not received much attention. It is about the human rights defenders. What we did is, this study included two parts, and we wanted to get a grassroots opinion of the situation, particularly what the human rights defenders are facing in this country. There are two elements to this project. The first one is the interview or the survey of 50 human rights activists. But the way we have defined them is this, that those who gather and report human rights abuses endeavor to stop such abuses and ensure that everyone has access to their universal rights. Universal rights is the one that I would like to underscore. It is an inalienable right as a human being, as a citizen, to have the fundamental rights of any country wherever you live in. And there is a background to it. The United Nations General Assembly has adopted 2 resolutions so far. One that has been in 1998, which underscored the protection of the human rights defenders. And in 2015, there was another resolution passed by the United Nations General Assembly, which not only underscored the human rights defenders' position, but also reminded all the countries of the United Nations to make necessary steps to protect the human rights defenders. Subsequently, many of these countries have actually created particular law to protect the human rights defenders. Bangladesh has actually voted in favor of both of them in 2015 and previously in 1998. Yet, there hasn't been any particular law that has been formulated by Bangladesh, whoever is in power, was in power in this country. That has created an enormous problem for human rights defenders, not to mention the overarching and overall political situation that leads to this kind of thing. So within that context, we try to find out the human rights defenders' situation, the challenges they face. So as I was saying, there are 2 parts to it. The first part is the 50 human rights defenders throughout the country, except the capital city, Dhaka. We reached out to them and did a survey. Those have been gathered from 36 districts of Bangladesh, which is distributed among the 8 divisions. The second part was that we have talked to the human rights organizations leaders, national leaders, and also, and thanks to, here I would like to take this opportunity to thank to the chair of the National Human Rights Commission, Dr. Kamaluddin, for talking to us. With those, this survey was conducted over a period of 1 month between 24th of May 2013, 23 and 24th of June. Who are the respondents of our survey? The first thing is the respondents, unfortunately, is very male biased, 80%. Why? Because this is also a very interesting thing that we have observed, that in case of Bangladesh, the human rights defenders seems to be, the female participation in human rights defenders are very small. This is a testimony to the situation that human rights defenders face, particularly as a gender dimension to it. Then most of them are Bengali, but however, we have accommodated the indigenous people and the human rights organization and human rights defenders in the indigenous people who work with the indigenous people. Mostly their about the average age was about somewhere between 46 and 65 years of age. So we have also noticed, as we have done, and this is done through a purposive sampling method. Why purposive sampling method? Because rightly we were noticing the purposive sampling method is because our sample was just to identify those who have been involved in human rights activities over the years. So this is a purposive sampling method that we used. In some cases we have done snowballing, but again the entire methodology is in our report. But what I can highlight is that we have selected them based on their performance and involvement with the human rights activities. Most of them have been engaged in human rights activities for more than 10 years, which gives us another advantage, that their impression is not just a snapshot of the current situation. They can actually provide a comparative study or comparative observation as to what is happening in Bangladesh or what kind of challenges they face. A very small amount of them, a very small number of them, is between 1st and 5th year. So what are the things that we have asked? There is a bunch of things that we have gone through in our survey, but I'm going to highlight only those which requires our immediate attention and gives us an opportunity to reflect. The first thing is that we asked them whether they face any obstacles. 86% of the human rights defenders at the grassroots level have said that the various obstacles they work with. 86% of them, overwhelmingly, they say that they are facing enormous obstacles. What are the obstacles they face? We'll go into that, but also we ask the overall situation, that is with respect to the human rights situation, because they are operating with an overall environment which, as we know, if we have read the Human Rights Watch report, Amnesty International report and others, and definitely the national organizations, some of them have been represented in our second part of the survey, but also two of the prominent organization is present here. So the human rights situation is poor and worsening. That is what they are doing. Remember, we said worsening because this is in large measure given that there are more than 10 years of involvement in the human rights sector. These are the respondents who can actually provide us a comparative perspective, whether it is not only today, not only during that particular month that we are talking about, but also what is happening previously. 46% of the survey respondents have rated the situation worse or near worst in a scale of 1 to 10. If you look at that, the worst that 28% of the respondents have said that this is the worst. That means more than a quarter of respondents are watching and seeing that this is the situation. The way we have scaled it from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, and if you look at the first 3 columns, what you get that more than 46% are in currently situation that this overall human rights situation in Bangladesh is worsening and poor. There is a 2% missing. This is interesting because I always, personally as a researcher, I always consider don't answer itself as a statement. The situation in some cases creates an environment within which respondents tends to be afraid not even to respond to the questions. That itself tells us a story. The silence itself is more loud than the speaking thing itself. Where are they getting these the obstacles which they have described as intimidation, in some cases persecution, threats? Where are they getting it from? Most of them are connected to the state, such as the law enforcement agencies. When we ask them, we actually offer them with 7 options. And then there was another which called others, which means they can actually document if we have missed any kind of potential obstacles or source of threat. What we have gathered is that law enforcement agencies, state intelligence agencies, government officials, these 3, which are definitely, if I am not mistaken, are directly connected to the state. Let me put it again, state. We are not talking about the government. The government is just the operating part of the state. The state agencies, in this instance, that human rights defenders are telling us that at least 42% of the intimidation, harassment, and threat and the obstacles they face comes from the state institutions. The state institutions are supposed to be. If we go back to 1995, the state, Bangladeshi state, actually voted in favor of a UNGA resolution which told to protect, and this is what they are telling us. The 4th source, which is the ruling party activist. So if you add those things, 42 and 23, you do the math. I'm very bad at math, but nevertheless I can count it that it is more than 60%. So these are the sources. Please note, this is something that based on this data, I want to insist how Bangladeshi state is actually behaving with its human rights defenders. What are the obstacles they face? They have talked about the intimidation, they have talked about the harassment, they have talked about the various kinds of obstacles. The breakdown of the responses that we have seen, and here I put it out, and it is in the report, but let me put it out. There are 15 individuals have noted about government repression. 3 of the individuals that we talked, and this is a very small sample. I understand it's a representative sample, but it's a small sample. We take that into account. Out of 50 responded, 3 have actually reported to be the victim of enforced disappearance. 11 of them, judicial harassment, physical attacks have been faced by 12, extortion or bribery with 7 individuals, restriction on activities by 27 individuals. And there are others that they have a wide variety of things that they have mentioned, an array of things that. So 60% of our respondents face threats to harms and 54% respond restriction on their activities. 60% of our respondents face threats to do harm to them. They have come from several sources. Of course, not all of them came from the state sector, but there are. If we go back to the previous slide that I've shown you and previous data, what do you see? State has become an instrument of this. Okay. And worrying thing, one of the worrying thing, we tend to know, because this has been reported in the press previously, this has been documented by the national organization as well as international organization, is this worrying thing of 10% of the human rights defenders have told us that their family members have been subjected to various kinds of threat, harassment, intimidation. 10% of them. So if you look at the human rights defenders, 1 in 10 have experienced that their family have been faced with intimidation. How these threats are posed, when they're talking that they have been, most of these actually, if you look at that, in person, 31.8% of the responses that we have received say that they are done in person, and 30 similar number through telephone or mobile devices. Again, if I take this opportunity to add a little bit of interpretation as a researcher based on the data, in this country, human rights defenders are being in-person threatened. And it is happening quite frequently. It should not be unknown to those who are in the government, National Human Rights Commission, for example, as it is known to the various organizations. 20% comes through the social media, such as the Facebook, but all these things, they have been sent with the parcels, they have been sent letters and all sorts of things. But as I said, one of the findings that needs to be underscored, highlighted, is the in-person threat and intimidation that is posed to the human rights defenders. Why? Why this intimidation? Most of these, our response is the purpose of threats or harassment was to stop a particular activity. That means the activities of the human rights defenders, often when they are engaged in exposing or in some ways become a, if not threat, definitely somewhat problematic, they are targeted and told not to do that one. To cause psychological or physical harm, and then to warn of future acts of violence against the recipient. Threat of violence is almost 1/5 in this case. There are multiple answers. Some of them actually responded to and said more than one thing they have faced. Even if we take one reference, out of this 50, at least one reference at one point that they made with respect to the physical harm or threat of physical harm of the future activities. This is not only to intimidate, but basically to stop them doing what they are working, to warn damage of their reputation is another thing that they have done, they have faced. What are the impacts? Now that we know, they consider that this is a very perilous job, they see what kind of a situation they face, what are the impacts on their lives? I'm thankful, personally I'm thankful, and our data actually suggests that we should be thankful to the human rights defenders of Bangladesh. Why? Because almost 1/3 of them still continue to do the work. And again, it's a multiple choice, and at least one person have mentioned that one. So at least 1/3 of the human rights activists, despite the overall situation which is poor, despite the fact that they continue to face the enormous hardship, the threat, intimidation, in person, yet 1/3 of them are continuing. I take this personal opportunity. As a researcher, I don't know whether I should insert it, but personally I think, as someone who tend to observe Bangladeshi politics and society, we should be thankful to them. But what is also, worrying part is this: had to reduce the scale of work. At a time when the human rights situation is worsening, Bangladesh is facing, and Zelur mentioned about the US action against the egregious violence, yet had to reduce the scale of work. Had to request protection from the state, most importantly, had to leave the area. 1 in 10 almost have mentioned that they had to leave their area to protect themselves, and in some cases to protect their families as well. Why don't they report it to the authorities? If there are threats, do they? We ask them whether they do. Highly underreported is 30% of them do not report. Due to, why don't they? Due to the lack of trust in the legal system. At least 1 in 5 responded told us, at least once referred to in a multiple choice option, that they have little trust on the legal system. Fear of retribution from the perpetrators. It is not only they're facing the adverse situation, but they're also afraid that if they report it, that might actually cause more damage to them. And remember, these are done in person. If you combine that with this, you can see what are the things they are facing. Also, investigation never leads to sufficient results. No proper investigation, at least in their perception, the investigations are not done properly. So reporting to the authorities are very low, and we know why those are low. These are the major things, but there are other things that has come up in this conversation, or both in conversation with the national human rights activists. 8 of them have been interviewed for our study. And of course, as I mentioned, National Human Rights Commission was interviewed as well. So what are the issues that came up in this conversation? As I said, that there are other parts to it. Not only that we talk to the grassroots level, what are the things? Involvement of state actors, which the grassroots levels are telling, but also the national human rights activists who have been interviewed say that relations between perpetrators and the government and the authorities' bias towards perpetrators are also cited as reasons for underreporting. If you look at the factors they are mentioning, and this is again both the human rights activists at the grassroots level as well as the national human rights activists are telling. Human rights organizations are the primary source of support of these human rights defenders, but their support, they have some reservation and complaint, so to speak. Their support and assistance are considered as inadequate by 36% of the grassroots HRDs. So this is a call not only for the government, this is a call for the human rights organization as well. They need support. And they are not yet exactly very much happy with or satisfied with the support. Human rights organizations agree with the grassroots that the human rights situation has worsened across the board. All the human rights activists, national level human rights activists that we spoke to, pretty much, almost unequivocally, unanimously have told us that the human rights situation is worsened. But the chairman of the Human Rights Commission, Dr. Kamal, is here, so we should also take in the perspective that the National Human Rights Commission, which is a statutory body, Human Rights Commission asserts that the human rights situation in Bangladesh has significantly improved over the past 5 decades because of the economic growth and economic development, awareness among the people, and the observation, allegation, as well as through our interviews with the KII, that is the human rights leaders, that they have been subjected to. In some instances, they have provided us enough examples of that they have faced as not only as an individual, as human rights organization, that they have been harmed, or actually they face the threat of being harmed. National Human Rights Commission feels that the instances of HRO being harmed are very limited. If I'm not, misinterpreting it, that is what we have gathered. Human rights organizations are allegedly given run around by the NGO Bureau when foreign funds are involved. And this instance, many of you, especially those who are in the press and definitely those who are engaged in human rights activities, do know the 2016 law has how it has adversely impacted, So what are our recommendations? There's a whole bunch of the recommendations that we have sorted out in your report, but let me highlight a few things. The first thing is there should be an explicit expression of political will and uphold the promise to improve the human rights situation. Without improving the general human rights situation, defending the human rights defenders is almost impossible. I said almost impossible because not necessarily it is 100%. So there should be an explicit expression from the government. And despite the fact that we are saying government, actually it implicitly is suggesting the state. The adversarial attitude that we see from the government towards the human rights defenders is not helpful. The second thing is the government must stop all form of harassment of HROs and HREs using various state agencies. We're not making it up. This is not a political position. This is what the data is telling us. When we asked the human rights defenders, especially the HROs, what they want, this is what they have come up with. Why? Because again, going back to the data that I have presented from the grassroots, state agencies are involved. The government should, in consultation with the HROs, legislate laws to protect the HRDs, that is human rights defenders, based on the UN resolutions of 98 and 2015. Foreign Donations Act, that is the Act of 2016, which includes terms as anti-state activities, inimical, derogatory comments, so on and so forth. From the human rights leaders that we have talked to, they have suggested the National Human Rights Commission structure and composition should be reformed as an independent body, a statutory body, represent the voices of HRDs and have the power to investigate and act as on incidents of human rights violation, including those perpetrated by law enforcement agencies. HROs should enforce their support, that is a call to the human rights organization. There are quite a few in Bangladesh, we know, and this is a call from the grounds. Let us be the messengers. I'm sure they communicated through their own processes, yet as an outsider, as a researcher, as someone who is looking at it from outside, let's make it very clear to the HROs that they should enhance their support mechanism. So these are some of the ones that I have highlighted. As to end this presentation, once again, I'm deeply indebted to Center for Governance Studies for supporting this. But most importantly, despite adversarial situation, human rights defenders are working, and they have helped us to gather this information. The 50 human rights defenders that we've talked to, that is the survey. Me, on my behalf, and on behalf of my research team, which again I cannot thank actually enough for what they have done. They have participated, took time, efforts. We have talked to human rights leaders, and they have given us enough time. Thanks to National Human Rights Commission for providing the information as well as the interview that has been given. This is an opportunity for us to reflect and look at it. Human rights defenders are in a very difficult spot at this point. Let us stand by them and Try to do what is absolutely necessary. That is a call from us. That's not a recommendation from the CGS report. This is me. Some of you may not know my name. My name is Ali Riaz. This is me speaking, saying, let's stand by them. Thank you.
So, thank you, sir, for your insightful presentation. For those interested, the hard copies of the report can be found at the publication booth just outside of the room, and the report is also available on the CGS website. Now, we will hear from our esteemed speakers. I kindly remind all of them to keep their remarks within allocated 7 to 10 minutes. I invite Barrister Sara Hussain, Honorary Executive Director of Bangladesh Legal Aid and Service Trust, BLAST, to share her thoughts.
Many thanks, and thank you to the Center for Governance Studies and of course to Professor Ali Riaz and his team for doing this research and organizing this event today. I would actually prefer to speak in Bangla, if that's okay. Is it okay? I know my following two speakers are definitely going to do that, so maybe I will start with a few English remarks and then go into Bangla. Because I do think if we're talking about human rights in Bangladesh, it would be more useful for us to the Amra Banglaয় কথা বলতাম. যাই হোক, I'll start with English, as I said, and move on. So I just want to start, I want to comment on the report rather than speak about the situation of human rights defenders in my experience particularly, because I think the report has I'm a bit concerned about the premise of the report. So I think when you started, Riaz Bhai, by saying that there are very, very few women human rights defenders, I find that a bit hard to understand, because I didn't really even understand what was the definition of human rights that was being used for understanding who are human rights defenders. My understanding is that human rights are about a very broad range of human rights, all of those that are protected under the Declaration and the covenants and international instruments, and also what we understand is being protected by our Constitution, by our fundamental rights, but also broader than our fundamental rights. So I think that protecting human rights or defending human rights includes defending, of course, the right to life and liberty, which I seem to understand from this report is what it was mainly focused on. But I think it also includes, of course, freedom of expression and association, and very importantly, the right to equality and non-discrimination. And I'm not very clear about whether the human rights defenders who've been spoken to here work on those issues as well, because it seems to me that those I would understand as human rights defenders are a much broader category of people who also work on rights to equality, as well as around, and rights to education, and rights to health, and rights to employment. So a much broader range than working around life, liberty, and, if you like, expression and association. And I think when you look at human rights in that broader perspective, again, I'm not speaking from a survey, but a little bit from my experience, I think that there are a lot of women in that group, and there are actually a lot of people from more diverse communities and diverse identities. And I think perhaps we need to think about whether your research would be different if you were to look at that wider group, and whether you would see different experiences and different perceptions. I think another maybe perspective issue, so it's interesting that you said that the majority of the people that you spoke with in this survey had worked for more than 10 years, and so I assume that they were looking at an approximately 10-year scale. Again, perhaps their perceptions would be somewhat different if they looked at a 15-year or a 20-year scale, because I think it's important when we're looking at the protection of human rights and the availability of remedies for human rights violations, but also at preventing human rights violations from taking place, that we try and understand what changes have happened in Bangladesh over a period of time, and also, very importantly, over different administrations, because it is important to understand who does what, to try and put in place different kinds of safeguards, and also who is involved in different kinds of violations. So, having said that, I think if we just look at what you're saying about what has been the impact in terms of the environment for the work of human rights defenders, I think certainly we can say that it's not a favorable environment. But I think the question to ask is also whether it has ever been a favorable environment. I think it's difficult to make this question about we can say it's worse within these 10 years, but perhaps we can also say it's worse. It's been terrible at other points before the 10 years as well. I want to give some examples of cases I've done in my personal capacity for organizations that were set up as non-governmental, set up as NGOs receiving foreign donations. All the cases I'd done actually were from perhaps 15 years ago, or even longer, maybe 18 years ago, some 20 years ago, under a different administration, where those organizations were refused foreign donations. They were completely stopped from receiving any foreign grants. Their governing bodies were taken over, and we were able to go to court in each of those cases and able to get each of the organizations to start working again. But we were not able to get their foreign grants released in most cases. They had to wait for a change of government for that to happen. So the reason I want to put this example out first is I think what is really concerning is that the errors of the past are being repeated and exacerbated. I think it's very important for us to look across different administrations and across different periods, not to say that they have done it, therefore I will do it, but to say we're not going to repeat those mistakes, we're going to do something different. So, to switch Korea kun Bangla. I hope there's some translation for those here who are not able to speak or follow Bangla. মূলত যেটা বলতে চাচ্ছি যে অবশ্যই মানবাধিকার কর্মীরা যারা আছেন তারা নিশ্চয়ই বিভিন্ন ধরনের, নিশ্চয়ই না অবশ্যই আমরা সবাই বুঝতে পারছি এবং অনেকে অনুভব করতে পারছি যে বিভিন্ন ধরনের চাপের মধ্যে আমরা থাকছি, কিন্তু এই চাপগুলো নতুন করে সৃষ্টি হয়নি। আমার মনে হয় না যে এমন কোনো সময় গেছে যেখানে এই ধরনের চাপ ছিল না, এবং আমরা শুধু 10 বছরের দৃষ্টিকোণ থেকে না দেখে যদি 15-20 বছর বা আরো লম্বা দৃষ্টিকোণ থেকে দেখি, তাহলে কিন্তু আমরা বুঝবো যে সব সময় এই চাপগুলো ছিল। পরিবর্তন কোথায় কোথায় হয়েছে সেটা বোঝার জন্য আমার মনে হচ্ছে যে বিভিন্ন ধরনের মানবাধিকার কর্মীর সাথে কথা বলা উচিত, যারা জীবনের অধিকার এবং ব্যক্তি স্বাধীনতার অধিকার, বাক স্বাধীনতার অধিকার নিয়ে কাজ করছেন তাদের সাথে অবশ্যই, কিন্তু পাশাপাশি যারা স্বাস্থ্য এবং শিক্ষার অধিকার এবং সমতার অধিকার নিয়ে কাজ করছেন তাদের সাথেও কথা বলা উচিত। এবং সকলের সাথে কথা বললে যে বিষয়গুলো আমার মনে হয় পরিষ্কার হবে যে কোনো কোনো ক্ষেত্রে কিন্তু আমরা যদি 3 ভাগে দেখি, একটা হলো যে আইনগত কাঠামো আগের চাইতে শক্তিশালী হয়েছে কিনা মানবাধিকার রক্ষার জন্য, দ্বিতীয়ত সেই কাঠামো, আইনগত কাঠামো প্রয়োগ হচ্ছে কিনা এবং সেই ক্ষেত্রে আমরা নতুন ধরনের বাধা নিষেধ বা বিভিন্ন ধরনের প্রতিকূলতা দেখছি কিনা, আর তৃতীয়ত যেই সব অবস্থা বা ব্যবস্থা যেগুলোর ব্যাপারে প্রফেসর আলী রিয়াজ মন্তব্য করেছেন এবং ওনার বিভিন্ন বিশ্লেষণও আছে যে একদম আইন বহির্ভূত বিভিন্ন ধরনের ব্যবস্থা, সেগুলো বেড়েছে কি কমেছে, তাহলে আমরা এই 3টা দিকে কিন্তু 3 ধরনের পরিবর্তন দেখব। আইনি কাঠামোর দিকে যদি আমরা তাকাই তাহলে আমাদের কিন্তু বলতে হবে যে আইনি কাঠামো আগের চাইতে শক্তিশালী হয়েছে মানবাধিকার কর্মীদের জন্য, এই অর্থে যে অনেক ধরনের অধিকার স্বীকৃতি পেয়েছে আইনের মাধ্যমে। প্রতিবন্ধীদের অধিকারের কথা যদি বলি, 20 বছর আগে আমাদের প্রতিবন্ধীদের অধিকারের কোনো আইন ছিল না, এটার জন্য প্রতিবন্ধী অধিকার নিয়ে যারা কাজ করছিলেন তারা লড়াই করে যাচ্ছিলেন। 30 বছর আগেকার কথা যদি বলেন, পার্বত্য চট্টগ্রামের জন্য আলাদা কোনো আইন ছিল না, যেখানে পার্বত্য চট্টগ্রামের বিশেষ করে পাহাড়ি যারা তাদের অধিকারগুলো কোনো স্বীকৃতি পেয়েছে। এখন সেই আইনগুলো আছে। I think we have to acknowledge that, এবং those are not, ওই আইনগুলো নির্দিষ্ট করে মানবাধিকার ডিফেন্ডারের জন্য তৈরি না, বাট অফ কোর্স মানবাধিকার স্বীকৃতি দেওয়ার জন্য ওই আইনগুলো তৈরি হয়েছে। সো উই হ্যাভ টু অ্যাকনলেজ দ্যাট ওই আইনগুলো এখন আছে এবং এগুলো ছিল না। আই থিঙ্ক দ্যাটস কোয়াইট ইম্পর্টেন্ট। বাট সেকেন্ড জিনিস হচ্ছে যে আমরা আইনি প্রতিকার, এই আইনগুলোর মাধ্যমে যেসব ব্যবস্থাগুলো তৈরি হয়েছে বা সব অধিকার স্বীকৃতি পেয়েছে, সেগুলো আমরা শেষ পর্যন্ত প্রয়োগ করতে পারছি কি পারছি না, সেই প্রতিকার কী ধরনের প্রতিকারের ব্যবস্থা রয়েছে আর সেগুলো আদায় করা সম্ভব কিনা, সেই জায়গায় যদি আমরা আরও ডিটেল স্টাডি পাই, বিশেষ করে যে এখানে আরেকটি পয়েন্ট আই থিঙ্ক প্রফেসর আলী রিয়াজ নিয়ে এসছেন, প্রতিকার পাওয়ার একটা বিষয়, আরেকটা ছিল যে জুডিশিয়াল হ্যারাসমেন্ট ফ্রেজটা উনি নিয়ে এসছেন, যে কোর্টের মাধ্যমে প্রতিকার পাওয়া হলো এক জিনিস আর কোর্ট বা বিচারিক প্রক্রিয়ার কারণে হয়রানির শিকার হওয়া আরেক জিনিস, এবং সেটা উনি দেখিয়েছেন খুব বেশ ভালো মাত্রায়, কিন্তু অনেকে জুডিশিয়াল হ্যারাসমেন্ট বা বিচারিক হয়রানির শিকার হচ্ছেন। সো এই জায়গাটাতে যদি আমরা আই থিঙ্ক বিশ্লেষণ করতে যাই, তাহলে আই থিঙ্ক আমরা বলতেই পারবো যে অনেক ক্ষেত্রে কিন্তু যে আইনি প্রতিকার পাওয়ার কথা সেগুলো পাওয়া যাচ্ছে না। সেগুলো কেন পাওয়া যাচ্ছে না সেটা আরও বিশ্লেষণ হওয়া উচিত। সেখানে কী ধরনের প্রেশার, কী ধরনের ফ্যাক্টরস, কী ধরনের কারণে এটা হয় না সেটা আমাদের দেখা দরকার। বাট অলসো বিচারিক হয়রানি কীভাবে হচ্ছে সেটা দেখা হচ্ছে, সেটা অনেক মাত্রায়। এখানে উনি যেসব অধিকারের কথা বলেছেন, আবার আমি যেগুলো বলছি, সেই ক্ষেত্রে আমরা দেখছি যে নানান ধরনের বিচারিক হয়রানি আনফর্চুনেটলি বাংলাদেশে হচ্ছে, এবং সেটা নিয়ে আমাদের আরও ডিটেলড গবেষণা খুবই প্রয়োজন। এবং অফকোর্স শুধু গবেষণা না, এই ব্যাপারগুলো নিয়ে, এই বিষয়গুলো নিয়ে ব্যবস্থা নেওয়া দরকার। লাস্ট বিষয়ে যদি আসি, যে বিচার বহির্ভূত যেসব ব্যবস্থাগুলো, যে এক্সট্রা জুডিশিয়াল বা অ্যাকশনস যেগুলোর আসলে কোনো লিগাল গাইডেন্স নেই মনে হচ্ছে, সেখানে আমরা দেখছি অনেক বড় ধরনের সমস্যা। এবং যেহেতু সেগুলো বিচার বহির্ভূতভাবেই হচ্ছে, সেখানে আবার বিচারিক প্রতিকার পাওয়াও যথেষ্ট জটিল। সো যারা এখানে মানবাধিকার রক্ষা করার জন্য কাজ করে যাচ্ছেন, তারা কিন্তু কোনো ধরনের আওয়াজও কোথাও তুলতে পারছেন না যে আসলে এইভাবে আমাদেরকে হয়রানি করা হচ্ছে। নিজেরা বলছেন, রাস্তায় দাঁড়িয়ে বলছেন, সভা সমাবেশ করে বলছেন, বাট কোনো প্রতিষ্ঠানের কাছে গিয়ে যেগুলোর জন্য প্রতিকার পাবেন সেরকম ব্যবস্থা নেই। আমাদের সাথে আজকে মানবাধিকার কমিশনের সভাপতি আছেন, ভেরি গ্ল্যাড দ্যাট ইজ হিয়ার, আমরা ওনার কাছে শুনবো। এটা একটা বড় ইস্যু যে মানবাধিকার কমিশন থাকা সত্ত্বেও সেখান থেকে প্রতিকার পাওয়া খুব বড় একটা সমস্যা। এবং পার্টিকুলারলি যেগুলো সবচাইতে ক্রিটিক্যাল অভিযোগ আমাদের দেশে এসছে, ফর এক্সাম্পল গুম হওয়ার অভিযোগ বলেন, বা হেফাজতে নির্যাতন হওয়ার অভিযোগ, যেগুলো রাইট টু লাইফ, রাইট টু ফ্রিডম ফ্রম টর্চার, এই ধরনের অধিকারের লঙ্ঘনের ব্যাপার, সেই ক্ষেত্রে মানবাধিকার কমিশনের কাছে যাওয়া, সেখান থেকে প্রতিকার পাওয়া খুবই মুশকিল। এবং সেটা কিছুটা সেই মানবাধিকার কমিশনকে গাইড করে যে আইনটি করা হয়েছে, সেই আইনের দুর্বলতার কারণেও। তো সেটাও আমার মনে হয় আমাদের শোনা উচিত যে কী ধরনের গ্যাপস আছে আমাদের আইনের মধ্যে, যে কারণে আমরা এই প্রতিকারগুলো পেতে পারি না। বা যখন আমরা দেখেছি যে এই ইস্যুগুলো নিয়ে কোর্টে যাওয়ারও চেষ্টা করা হয়েছে, সেখানেও আনফর্চুনেটলি আমরা বারবার যেটা দেখছি যে কোর্ট কিন্তু সেই ইনভিটেশনটা গ্রহণ করছে না, রেসপন্সটা দিচ্ছে না। সো ফর এক্সাম্পল গুম নিয়ে বোধহয় 1-2টা মামলা হয়েছে এখন অবধি, খুব বেশি যে হয়েছে তাও না, বাট সেখানেও কিন্তু কোর্ট থেকে আমরা কোনো ধরনের প্রতিকার পাইনি এখন পর্যন্ত। নির্যাতন থেকে মুক্ত হওয়ার ব্যাপারে আমাদের আদালত থেকে আমরা কয়েকবার দেখেছি বিভিন্ন ধরনের গুরুত্বপূর্ণ পদক্ষেপ নেওয়া হয়েছে। একটা নিয়ে আমি আশা করছি আমাদের শ্রদ্ধেয় পান্না ভাই, অ্যাডভোকেট জাদাই খান পান্না আছেন, উনি বলতে পারবেন। প্রায় 25 বছর ধরে কোর্ট থেকে আমরা একটা ডিরেকশন পেয়ে আছি যে পুলিশ যখন কাউকে গ্রেফতার করে পরোয়ানা ছাড়া, তখন তাদের কী সব নিয়ম নীতি অনুসরণ করতে হবে। এই কেসটা হয়েছিল 1996 না 96 সনে সম্ভবত। না, 3-এর আরো আগে, রুবেলের হত্যা, হ্যাঁ 2003-এর ফার্স্ট কেসটা আই থিঙ্ক, হ্যাঁ 96 বা 7-এ। রুবেল হত্যার একজন ছাত্রকে ডিবিতে নিয়ে যাওয়া হয়, ডিবি থেকে তার লাশ তার বাবা মার কাছে দেওয়া হয়, এবং সেটা নিয়ে একটা জুডিশিয়াল ইনকোয়ারি কমিশন হয়। পরবর্তীতে সুপ্রিম কোর্টে একটি জনস্বার্থ মামলা হয়, হাইকোর্টের নির্দেশনা দেয়, সুপ্রিম কোর্টের নির্দেশনা দেয়। সুপ্রিম কোর্টের রায় দিয়েছে, তাও প্রায় 6 বছর আগে। এখন সেই কেসে আবার রিভিউ পিটিশন করা হয়েছে, আপনারা শুনবেন সেটার পরবর্তীতে কি হলো। আমি শুধু উদাহরণটা এই কারণে দিচ্ছি যে আমাদের হিউম্যান রাইটস ডিফেন্ডারদের জন্য প্রোটেকশন পেতে হলে শুধু আইন করলে কিন্তু কাজটা হবে না, বিকজ অ্যাজ আই সেড এট দ্য বিগিনিং, অনেক ধরনের আইন ইতিমধ্যে আমাদের হয়েছে। উই হ্যাভ quite a lot of protections existing under law. We also have quite a lot of laws that protect different kinds of communities and recognize rights, and we've had an improvement, I would say, in legislation over the past many years, and we've seen, I think, steady progress in improvement in those kinds of laws, recognizing broader groups and also addressing different issues. But what we haven't seen is effective implementation of the law. And what we have also seen, and I think we've seen this in the past, as I said, under previous administrations, and we continue to see it now, is the continuance of extrajudicial forms of harassment. So different entities of the state creating pressures, often understood but not even articulated in the form of orders and directions and references to the judiciary or even any other authority, but this increasing understanding of what you can and you can't do. And in that context, I think this issue about, I'll just end, if I may have just one more minute, please, from the organizers. Dr. El-Riaz has raised the issue of legislation that needs to go, that needs to be repealed to provide a more enabling environment for human rights defenders. One of those is the Digital Security Act. But I think we also have to look, the Digital Security Act is a relatively recent piece of legislation. We're all very familiar with the problems it's created and the violations, in the human rights violations its implementation so far has resulted in. But we have a huge swathe of legislation which is from the pre-constitutional period, even from the colonial, not even the Pakistan period, but the British colonial period, which also creates all kinds of forms of discrimination and violations that human rights defenders have to work with. It's more than high time to look at the entire body of legislation that we have from the lens of whether it is constitutionally permissible or not. So I think it's not just the DSA. We should be doing this exercise with other legislation as well. We should be looking, and we should be looking at, for example, why we are still burdened with a police act from the 19th century. How can that make sense in the digital age that we have an 1861 law that we're living with? We have a fully drafted amendment to the police, not even amendment, if a whole new police act was drafted, I think almost perhaps 20 years ago. It's been sitting awaiting consideration. Nobody knows where it is anymore, but those are the things that have to come forward. And just a final point on institutions. We've talked about the courts and the National Human Rights Commission as key institutions in terms of protection, and also through laying down guidelines in terms of prevention of human rights violations and creating a situation within which human rights defenders can operate to prevent and to protect themselves. And in that context, I want to mention the Information Commission as another potentially critical institution for us to look at in terms of human rights defense, and a role that it isn't playing at the moment. And very finally, at the role of the NGO Affairs Bureau, which again is meant to be simply a facilitative body. We might have forgotten now in the mists of time that this entity was set up in order to facilitate and make easier the bringing in of foreign grants to support all kinds of activities in Bangladesh, charitable activities essentially, poverty alleviation, and human rights, support of human rights is one of those amongst many. Instead, unfortunately, we are now seeing that the availability of foreign grants is being seen as some kind of negative activity, something that has to be controlled and managed, even though many of the activities that foreign grants are for, including human rights, are entirely complementary to the role of what the state is doing. Yes, in some cases, protection of human rights can be adversarial to the state, where we're protecting life and liberty against state agencies, but in the vast majority of cases, it's entirely complementary. The state has policies to protect women against violence, to protect children against violence, to eliminate discrimination against people with disabilities, to eliminate discrimination against, for example, the Hijra community. All of these activities are being undertaken by state authorities, and it's impossible for state authorities to do them on their own. They have to do them by engaging the community, by engaging people, by engaging citizens, and that's what these kinds of grants and support and so on are for. So it's completely counterproductive to try and stop these, and it's even more counterproductive to stop them in a kind of reflex action against what are perhaps perceived as criticisms of the human rights situation in the country. So I hope that Professor Ali Riaz's important research will help us to rethink those processes, and I hope that it will help us to begin a dialogue. I don't feel entirely convinced that it will, but I think that if we have the chair of the National Human Rights Commission with us, along with others over here, that maybe that will be the beginning of the dialogue that we need. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable remarks. Now I request the prominent human rights defender advocate Jerai Khan Panna, chairperson of Ain o Salish Kendro, to address the audience.
Who defends the defenders? My friend Nurul Kabir said earlier that only the Allah, Almighty Allah. And my opinion is only the rule of law, a country guided by the rule of law. In absence of rule of law, can I speak in Bangla? Mix. Okay. Without having the rule of law, a country can run smoothly. In our country, democracy is already in auction. You have money, you can purchase nomination and can be elected as the member of the parliament. And what about our judiciary? One is parliament, one is election commission, one is executive, and one is judiciary. What is the present condition of judiciary? কারো কোনো আস্থা আছে বলে আমার মনে হয় না। আমার প্রায় 4 দশকের বেশি, প্রায় 5 দশক হয় নাই, হবে কাছাকাছি। তো প্রথমে রাজনীতি না করে যদি প্রফেশন করতাম তাহলে বোধহয় 6 দশকেই পাড়া দিতে পারতাম। তো তার অভিজ্ঞতা বলতে পারি যে মানুষ ইমিডিয়েটলি কিছুদিন আগে ইন্ডিয়ান প্রেসিডেন্ট মুর্মু উনি একটা কথা বলেছেন যে মানুষ ভয় পায় বলে নাই, বলছে যে ভগবানের মতো ভয় পায় 3টা জিনিসকে, ডাক্তার, লয়ার, ডাক্তার, আদালত এবং পুলিশ। খুব ভদ্রভাবে বলছেন, আমি এটাই ঘুরেই বলছি যে এই 3টার কাছে মানুষ না প্রয়োজন না পড়লে পরে যায় না, পরের দুটোতে নাই। Clear? So, it's a country is running by the police. Country is running by the bureaucrats, not by the politicians. Politics is doing by the syndicate of businessmen or smugglers or black money holders. Clear? They can purchase even the judgment. For example, one of Samrat. You know Samrat? Samrat means emperor. Emperor means emperor of the hooligans. And he obtained the bail from the lower court, and never he was in the jail. All through was in hospital. And our chairman of Human Rights Commission, he is in here. He will be able to reply about the present situation and present condition of our country, but I am still hopeful that because I am a freedom fighter, I am hopeful that one day we will establish a fearless country of rule of law. Thank you all. Oh, thanks, Dr. Ali Riaz, for his excellent recommendations, particularly recommendations the government must stop all form of harassment of the HRO and HRDs using various state agencies. It is also request to our chairman of National Human Rights Commission. Please look after this. We are facing the several serious, as on behalf of us, I must say that they are creating serious problem. They are not helping or assisting us, but they are creating problem, not to aware the people regarding their fundamental rights. So they can, particularly the bureaucrats. And what can I say? It's a country, neither police nor, it's a country running by the bureaucrats, none else. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful comments. Now we have honor of welcoming Dr. Kamaluddin Ahmed, Chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, as a key figure in the protection and promotion of human rights in our nation. We are eager to hear for your remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I must thank Dr. Riaz for bringing out such a wonderful report regarding defenders, human rights defenders. And at the end, he said, let's stand by them. I fully agree with him. We should all stand beside human rights defenders. Now, we normally see that, well, people who speak against influential people, they suffer everywhere, not only in Bangladesh, everywhere. And in Bangladesh context, this research has been conducted, and I came to know that it's only on 50 people, the respondents. And it hasn't been clearly said about who are these people. An issue like human rights and human rights defenders, which is there all over the country. I don't know whether this 50 number is sufficient or not, because this, and they worked for last 10 years. And I also agree that, well, lots of things happened in the past also. One thing I must say that, well, after hearing the presentation or the comments of two gentlemen, two lady and gentlemen, probably I am the person here to speak or reply to a lot of questions as a chairman of the National Human Rights Commission. National Human Rights Commission is a commission which is an advisory body which looks after lots of things as watchdog, the violation of human rights all over the country, and to report to the concerned or and to guide or direct concerned authorities to work in regard to fulfilling the rights of the people, not that, well, the violations should be accepted by any particular authority. So in regard to that, I believe National Human Rights Commission has been doing a lot of things, and probably you are interested to know how we do all those things. One of the most important mechanisms is receiving complaints from all over the country. As Barrister Sara Hussain said that, well, after reporting to National Human Rights Commission, people do not get support properly. I would humbly disagree with that, well, it's not the fact. In fact, we receive lots of complaints every week. Our benches sit together with important people who are quite experienced about human rights and who know about laws, current laws, and the constitutional provisions that that agree with rights of the people. And that's why it's not really coming to the press regularly that what National Human Rights Commissions are doing. Unfortunately, another notion probably is that people consider that National Human Rights Commission is an organ of the government. It's a wrong notion probably, and that's why prime media, they do not consider about writing about the activities of National Human Rights Commission. I would very humbly say that. They hardly bother about writing about what is happening, and even when there were some crises with people in the Chittagong Hill Tract area, in the case of cleaners, when National Human Rights Commission stood beside these people, there are a number of such incidents. When National Human Rights Commission stood beside these people, after seeing the newspaper reports, after getting information from different sources, then probably situation was controlled and people got fruition, but it didn't come to the press. There are lots of such incidents, and I would say just only a few days ago, in the case of dialysis of people, the fee was raised from 530 taka to 3,000 taka overnight. It was really unfortunate because a person cannot delay taking dialysis support. National Human Rights Commission, even on the weekend, on the holiday, sent people to the court for releasing those people who were arrested, and also directed the health authority, health directorate, to stop this kind of raising of the fees for dialysis, and it was complied. And it didn't come to the press that, well, National Human Rights Commission supported these people, and that's why it had happened. Although it is an advisory body, I shall fully tell that, well, when we tell something to different authorities, in most of the cases they listen to it. And it is a kind of tendency that, well, when there is a case of criminal activities, people consider that it is the degradation of human rights situation in the country, whereas there are many other things that are related to human rights, like Universal Declaration of Human Rights has said 30 articles, has brought in lots of things in the human rights. Some of those have been mentioned by Barrister Sara Hussain very nicely. Those things have also been regularly taken into consideration by National Human Rights Commission. And National Human Rights Commission directed different authorities for listening to those. And also that, well, if it is a violence of human rights of people in ethnic groups, just about 3 months ago, we went to Chittagong Hill Tracts. The full commission stood beside people whose houses were burnt, who were evicted from their land. And after that, I can only in short say that, well, it could be prevented. It could be stopped at that stage. Okay, so, but it hasn't been said by lots of people in the press, especially prime media. They consider that it's a government organization, so what, they have done it. This is quite unfortunate. And then there are many other incidents I can mention. The other day, Shahidul Islam was killed. Who is this Shahidul Islam? As a matter of fact, Mr. Ali Riaz has mentioned that there are 50 respondents. I don't know who are these respondents, but I consider that in our country, main human rights defenders are journalists. Journalists, because they speak and that's why they get killed even. You remember Mr. Rabbani, Nadim Rabbani, he was killed, and I went to his house. I went to his house to understand these things, and we directed concerned law enforcement authorities to look at it and to inquire things properly and bring out all those culprits to put them to justice. So as I was trying to say that, well, these are the journalists who get to investigative journalism, and for their investigative journalism, they become victim of the situation. Mr. Riaz mentioned about 3 groups of people: intelligence agencies, law enforcement agencies, and government officials. And lastly, of course, the people of the ruling party. Okay? They also are in the process of perpetrating the people who are human rights defenders. Yes, in the case of Nadim also, journalist Nadim also, it happened like that. And he was killed by one person. I wouldn't really that way say, unfortunately, because it's it is a matter of, it will be a matter of sub judice. But as we know that, well, a group of people were there to execute him, and they belong to the ruling party, and later they were expelled from the party. I can say that, well, that's something good, but I wouldn't really want to say that, well, it's only the ruling party people who are doing all these things. There are other people also, and there it is, this kind of violations are over there in the whole country. Lots of things are being looked after by these things. But I would say that, well, our human rights defenders, if not the journalists, then only the small number of groups of people. In my interview also for this particular research, I said that, well, there are organizations like Aino Shalishkan, Rob Blast, and Article 19, all these organizations, they're good organizations, and we cooperate with them and we try to work together. We have MOU with them, and we try to work together because there are some other organizations. There is a mushroom growth of human rights organizations who are not really doing human rights. They are rather rent seekers. Many of them are rent seekers. You might have seen in the newspaper just a few days ago, one organization, Bangladesh Human Rights Commission. My goodness. Can you imagine? They are writing commission, and they are writing the name of Bangladesh, and they are announcing that if you want to go outside the country for a convention in the UK, please register. And then it was seen that they are taking money from them, 20,000 taka initially for the registration, and then 3 lakh taka for the other purpose. So these things are happening over there. There are we receive lots of complaints. Nowadays we go to different districts and we sit with our committee in different districts. And one particular common concern and complaint from people who we face over there, they say that, well, this organization, they were telling that, well, they would be going for some kind of compromise or some kind of settlement of the problems between people. And they're taking money from us. What is that? I said that, well, no such organization can really help you to do that, and there is no authority on the part of any organization to go for, any kind of trial, any kind of dispute resolution that way. Because this dispute resolution matter is officially, or rather by law, it is vested onto some organizations, like even Union Council can do that, not by these particular organizations. But they have been doing it. That's why we are quite concerned about these things. I do not know who are these, I do not know whether any such organization participated over there. So this Bangladesh Human Rights Commission person, I came to know that, well, he did not pass SSC in 2 times. On the 3rd time he passed SSC, but he writes Dr. Dildar. So these type of people are working, and they are earning huge amount of money. They have got big vehicles, you would be surprised to see, and they put on different types of attire, giving people understanding that, well, they are the real human rights defenders. They have flags on their vehicle. There were specific orders from the High Court, from the Supreme Court I mean, that, well, they cannot do it, they cannot write BHRC, they cannot write commission, but they do not care about these things. So see how much desperate these people are. So we have to be very careful about thinking about human rights defenders. Who are these human rights defenders? In many cases, what they do, just to understand, just to give their, give their identity as good human rights defenders, they send us some paper cuttings to take action against some people. Now this is so easy a thing that, well, taking newspapers and sending these paper cuttings to Human Rights Commission is very easy, and then they say that we sent 20 paper cuttings and no actions have been taken, okay, or 17 have been taken into consideration and no others have been taken. So this is just about those people. I shouldn't really lengthen this. I would say that, well, Dr. Riaz has done a wonderful task about human rights defenders, but what I feel that the spectrum should be wider, should have been wider, taking into consideration lots of people who are working, and also not the people who have been working for 10 years only. Okay, Mr. Zillu said that, well, there are lots of sanctions against our country. Well, I do not really want to specifically say anything because I am not going to defend anybody. I am not going to defend specifically. If I say, I would not really defend the government about these things. Whoever is in crime, definitely he is bad. When we say about crimes, if somebody commits a crime against another person, we call it a crime or an offense. When state cannot give any protection to anybody, then it becomes human rights. Because the state has mechanism, state has law enforcement agencies to defend these people. As we say that law enforcement agencies are the principal defenders of human rights. Okay, they at first go and catch up with all those people who are not doing things right. But unfortunately, we receive lots of complaints against law enforcement agencies. They have also been doing, and we have also been talking about against law enforcement agencies. And we have even fined law enforcement agencies. Ministry of Home Affairs had to reimburse the amount. I mean, they pay the amount to concerned aggrieved person. So those things have been done. It's not that, well, the sanctions came and that's why we have to support it. No, sanctions came, well, it may be because of that. In my interview in Tritiya Matra, I also mentioned that there are things like that, but of course there is a geopolitics. We have to understand that. We find that, well, in geopolitics, lots of things are considered right, lots of things are not considered right because of the situation. It's not that, well, everything is very bad or everything is very quite fair. Unfortunately, as a country, as a developing country, we have to probably compromise with a lot of things. We have to listen to lots of people. That's our unfortunate situation. And there are people who speak about Bangladesh in such a way. I'm telling it with a strength that, well, it is our country. We have to understand our situation. And there is image crisis of our country in outside world. Sometimes things do not really go properly. Sometimes some people send concocted reports. I have a specific assessment of the reports sent by those people to top brass in USA and in EU. And I found that many of them are specifically written just to put some people into a kind of or leveling them into a situation which is definitely violation of human rights. But they probably suppress lots of facts. They have not said what is right. And those people who have sent it, it is very much understood that they have sent it because some people prepared these papers for them. So this is unfortunate for our country. I was reading a report about ADB, a report written by ADB. ADB was telling that Bangladesh has been telling about their development, the growth, whatever the amount they mention, unfortunately, it is even less than what they achieve. Okay, this is something good, definitely. With the passage of time, we are progressing. I would say that, well, we are achieving lots of things. There are lots of progresses, and of course, there are discriminations also. There are frustrations about discrimination. I would definitely tell that. Not everything is very fine, but definitely there are lots of good things have been done. So I would say that, well, lastly, I would conclude with these words that I thank Dr. Riaz and Center for Governance Studies for conducting such a report. And as Barrister Sarah Hossain says that we should go into dialogues. Definitely, we should go into dialogues. We should try to find out, and we can work together to find out the right situation and tell and let people know what is the right situation, so that in future we will not be feeling so much of frustration. We will not be feeling so much frustrated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful thoughts. The NIHRC's chairman has mentioned that the journalists are the main human rights defenders. So I would like to invite Mr. Nurul Kabir, the editor of New Age, for his remarks.
Yes, good morning to everybody, the Honorable Chair, speakers, and the audience. Well, let's settle about the language first. Human rights issues are national and international issues, of course, and at the same time we cannot effectively address the human rights issues until and unless we can make the people at large aware of that. And for that to happen, of course, we should use the what we call our mother tongue. But we have some foreign friends here too, but I'm sure that the CJs has the mechanism to get the get the contents of the speeches translated. Maybe they will be knowing it a little later. I would prefer rather to speak in Bangla. Well, before I switch to Bangla, let me tell you all that the things that I plan to speak has now been changed, particularly after what our Honorable Chair of the National Human Rights Commission has changed. So what I thought about it, and many people have, of course, spoken about the issues that I also wanted to say. Before I get into that, I must thank Dr. Ali Riaz for an important research. Side by side with that, I agree with some of our colleagues who said that the areas of research should have been expanded a little more. I would just add that it would have also been beyond the normal human rights issues, that I would expect that human rights issues virtually or eventually is a political issue. If the political is not even primarily the legal issue, it's a political issue. Say one of our colleagues says that the rule of law, well, there is standard definition of rule of law, but when you have a lot of unjust laws in vogue, so it eventually, even a government goes by the laws, it could well be rule of unjust laws. Whether there would be just laws or unjust laws, it depends on the political perspective of those who enact laws. So come back to my point. I'm very happy to know today that our chairman of the Human Rights Commission has said 2 points that caught my attention. One is, অধিকাংশ ক্ষেত্রে হিউম্যান রাইটস কমিশনের যে রেকমেন্ডেশনস এগুলো সরকারের এজেন্সিগুলি শোনে। আমি ব্যক্তিগতভাবে নাগরিক হিসেবে অনেক খুশি হয়েছি। আমি ওনাকে অনুরোধ করব, যেহেতু হিউম্যান রাইটস কমিশনের কথাগুলি শোনে, কারণ লটা প্রসেস করার সময় প্রক্রিয়ার মধ্যে আমি ছিলাম, যারা বাইরে থেকে সাজেস্ট করেছে। হিউম্যান রাইটস একটা বড় দুর্বলতা হচ্ছে এই কমিশনের সাজেশনস রিকমেন্ডেশনস সরকার পালন করতে বাধ্য নয়, ম্যান্ডেটটা পুরোপুরি নাই। এর কতগুলি দুর্বলতা আছে যেগুলি নিয়ে হয়তো ভবিষ্যতে আমাদের আরও কাজ করতে হবে। তবু যদি সরকারি সব কথা যদি হিউম্যান রাইটস কমিশন শোনে, আমি অনুরোধ করব আপনারা প্লিজ সরকারকে বলেন এক্সট্রা জুডিশিয়াল মার্ডার বন্ধ করতে, প্লিজ তাদেরকে বলেন কাস্টোডিয়াল টর্চার বন্ধ করতে, প্লিজ তাদেরকে বলেন যে সংবাদপত্রের স্বাধীনতা, ডেমোক্রেটিক ফ্রিডম, এটা নিশ্চিত করতে, প্লিজ তাদেরকে বলেন হিউম্যান রাইটস ডিফেন্ডার্সদেরকে ইন্টিমিডেট না করতে। এই কয়েকটা জিনিস আপনারা বলে দেন, করে দিলে আমরা খুব খুশি হয়ে যাই। আর যতক্ষণ এটা করছে, প্লিজ প্লিজ আমার অনুরোধ, আপনারা এই কথাটা বলবেন না। আইদার আপনারা এই কথাগুলি হিউম্যান রাইটস কমিশনকে বলে, সরকারকে বা রাষ্ট্রকে বলেন না, কারণ বললে যদি শোনে, কিন্তু আমরা দেখছি এগুলো শুনছে না, তার মানে আপনারা বলছেন না। আর তা না হলে আপনি বলছেন যে আপনারা বলেন, তাহলে আপনি বলুন প্লিজ যে ন্যাশনাল হিউম্যান রাইটস কমিশনের কথা রাষ্ট্র এবং সরকারগুলো, আমি শুধু এই সরকারের কথা বলছি না, অতীতের সরকারগুলো শোনে না। অন্তত আপনারা যদি এটা বলেন, আমরা যারা নাগরিক, আমরা যারা এখানে একটা রাষ্ট্র এবং সমাজের একটা গণতান্ত্রিক রূপান্তর দেখতে চাই, তারা আপনাদের পক্ষে লড়াই করতে পারবো। প্লিজ ডোন্ট কনফিউজ পিপল। পয়েন্ট নম্বর 1। পয়েন্ট নম্বর 2, আপনি একটা জিও পলিটিক্সের কথা তুলেছেন। ইয়েস, রাজনীতিতে জিও পলিটিক্স তো থাকবে, সবসময় ছিল। জিওগ্রাফি এবং পলিটিক্স যতক্ষণ পর্যন্ত যখন তৈরি হয়েছে এবং যতদিন পর্যন্ত থাকবে সেটা ছিল। প্রশ্নটা হচ্ছে সেই ক্ষেত্রে আমরা আমাদের অধিকারটা কিভাবে সংরক্ষণ করব। আপনি লক্ষ্য করুন, যখনই প্রায় প্রতিটা সরকারের আমলে, বিভিন্ন মাত্রায়, এক এক সরকারের আমলে এক এক মাত্রায়, যখনই মানুষ গণতন্ত্রের কথা বলে, হিউম্যান রাইটসের কথা বলে, আপনার নানান অধিকারের কথা বলে, তখন সবগুলি সরকারের একটা ন্যারেটিভ থাকে। প্রত্যেকটা সরকার অতীতে করেছে, এই সময় সেটা বেড়েছে। আমি এখানে আলী রিয়াজকে একটু ডিফেন্ড করব যে উনি কিন্তু বলেন নাই যে এর আগের সরকারগুলি করেন নাই হিউম্যান রাইটস ভায়োলেশন বা তার আমলে। উনি বলেছেন ওয়ার্জেনিং, অর্থাৎ আস্তে আস্তে আরও খারাপের দিকে যাচ্ছে। প্রশ্নটা হচ্ছে এই হিউম্যান রাইটস ডিফেন্ডার্সদের, ইনক্লুডিং জার্নালিস্ট, অপোজিশনাল ইন্টালেকচুয়ালস, তাদেরকে দি ব্লেম দ্যাট এভরি গভর্নমেন্ট গিভস এগেইনস্ট দিস, এরা ভাবমূর্তি নষ্ট করছে বিদেশে, এরা দেশের শত্রু। এই যে গভর্নমেন্টাল ন্যারেটিভ দ্যাট পলিটিক্যাল অপোনেন্টস or the oppositional intellectuals are tarnishing the image of the country is always a government narrative, because they don't want these people to spread the truth that incumbents are not acting well. Every government has done this. Now question is, এই ন্যারেটিভটা যখন সরকারের পক্ষ থেকে আসে, আমি লক্ষ্য করেছি অনেককে সংকুচিত হতে, ভয় পেয়ে যায়, দেশের শত্রু হিসাবে শনাক্ত করা, রাজাকার বানিয়ে দেওয়া, দেশপ্রেমিক নয় এটা বলা। আপনাদের জন্য, এরা যারা একটু ভয় পান, তাদের পরিষ্কার বিবেকের জন্য আমি আপনাদেরকে একটা কথা বলে রাখছি। সেটা হচ্ছে যে এই ইন্টারন্যাশনাল কমিউনিটিস বলে তো একটা ব্যাপার আছে। উই লিভ ইন দি কমিউনিটি অফ স্টেট, নেশন স্টেটস। সো আমরা ইউনাইটেড নেশনসের একটা কম্পোনেন্ট। ইউনাইটেড নেশনস হয়েছিল কেন? পৃথিবীর নানা জায়গায় নানা সমস্যা আছে, এই সমস্যাগুলোকে একসাথে বসে কনফ্লিক্ট রেজলিউশন করে এবং অন্য সমস্যাগুলোকে একত্রিতভাবে দেখে অ্যাড্রেস করার জন্য বিভিন্ন আন্তর্জাতিক সংগঠন ইতিহাসের প্রয়োজনে গড়ে উঠেছে। তাহলে আমার যখন সমস্যা হয়, আমার সরকার যখন আমার কথা শোনে না বা অপরাধ করে, তখন ইন্টারন্যাশনালি এইটা নিয়ে যা আমার গণতান্ত্রিক কর্তব্যের মধ্যে পড়ে। কারণ এখানে যখন শোনে না, তখন আমারই মঞ্চ, ওইটাও ইউনাইটেড নেশনস আমারই জায়গা, নানান রিজিওনাল ফোরামগুলি আমারই জায়গা, সেখানে আমাদের রিপ্রেজেন্টেশন আছে। ফলে সেখানে যদি আমি কমপ্লেইন করি, ইট ক্যানট বি কনসিডার্ড আনপ্যাট্রিয়টিক, because our state recognizes the international bodies that we are party to. So I have all the rights to complain against my government or non-governmental authorities who infringes my right to complain to other organizations that they are also attached with. So raising voices against an authoritarian regime, no matter which party is in power, or any social authorities who are violating human rights or political, economic, cultural rights of the citizens, this voice cannot be considered unpatriotic. The narratives that the governments and other organizations come up with, they are unpatriotic and at the same time violating the international norms and rules that we are entitled to. So আপনারা যারা হিউম্যান রাইটস ডিফেন্ডার আছেন, ওই কথা সেটা আওয়ামী লীগ বলুক, বিএনপি বলুক, বিউরোক্রেসি বলুক, যে এরা দেশের ইমেজ নষ্ট করছে, এটা সত্য না। কারণ এটা লিগ্যাল রাইট। ওই বডিজগুলি আমাদের, আমরা সবগুলি বলিতে বাংলাদেশ সরকার আমাদের জনগণের ট্যাক্সের পয়সায় ছোট ছোট পরিমাণে হলো চাঁদা দেয়। সো ওইগুলিকে ব্যবহার করা খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ। পৃথিবীর আজকের এই ইন্টারন্যাশনালাইজেশনের যুগে, গ্লোবালাইজেশনের যুগে পৃথিবীর কোনো দেশের সমস্যা এখন আর কেবলমাত্র ন্যাশনাল লেভেলে সলভ করা সম্ভব না। We have to address all our problems or problems of other communities of the state, both at the national and international level. Of course, we know what is our geopolitical interest and what is not. এটা বোঝা শুধু গভর্নমেন্টের একলা এখতিয়ার না, এটা সচেতন নাগরিকরা বোঝে যে কোনটা আমার জিওপলিটিক্যাল ইন্টারেস্ট অ্যান্ড কোনটা আমার নয়। ফলে এইটা দিয়ে যদি আপনারা অ্যাটাক করতে আসে, তাহলে we will invite dialogue. We don't want to confront. Let's have the honest courage to discuss with us in the open that what you are considering geopolitical interest and what we are considering geopolitical interest may conflict, because we consider things on behalf of our country, on behalf of the people at large, and mostly governments, I say governments, not the government, consider from their narrow political partisan interests. So we are ready to have dialogue, but please don't call us unpatriotic. And don't, when they do that, you people don't believe in them, don't trust them. When the state finds you a troublemaker, perhaps in most cases, I don't say in all cases, in most cases you are on the right track, because usually the undemocratic states, in most cases, violates human rights. So at times, calling the attention of the state to be called unpatriotic is the most patriotic thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable remarks. Now that we have heard from our esteemed speakers, now I would like to request the principal investigator of this study, Dr. Ali Riaz, to provide his concluding remarks. Dr. Ali Riaz.
Thank you, Roman. I'm really glad that the organizers has given me this opportunity to come back and clarify a few of the things, particularly on the methodological issues. As a researcher, it is indeed a pleasure when someone is asking about your methodology, because it shows that the content seems to be reaching to a different level. So there are a few questions that have been raised, and I feel obligated to respond to them. Advocate Sarah Hussain as well as Kamaluddin Hussain has raised these questions, and I think it is imperative that I make sure. One thing that has confused people when I said more than 10 years. 99 years is more than 10 years. Let us not forget about it. This is a plain and simple math. The point is, we put a cut-off point of 10 years. There are individuals who have been involved for 25, and Roman, if I'm wrong, please correct me. He has been one of my most trusted assistants in this program. There have been people who have worked more than 35 years who have responded. More than one respondent have worked for more than 35 years. So suggesting that it is only for 10 years that we're looking at is methodologically, it is my responsibility that I didn't make it clear, but it has been reported in our report in the methodology section. That's why we have clarified it. So no, we are not looking at individuals who have been working for 10 years. And by suggesting that if there is any tacit understanding that it is flawed, I would defend my ground to the last day, because we didn't do it. It is more than 10 years, means some of them are, it is cut-off point. If you look at the report and the one that I showed, large number of them are more than 10 years. Significant number of them are 10 years, right? It is almost 80% of our respondents have been more than 10 years. Number two, on the methodological issue. Both Barrister Sarah Hussain and Dr. Kamaluddin has raised. Where did we find these 50 people? That's why I mentioned in the beginning that it is a purposive sampling. How do they reach out to the 50%? First of all, in any research, any survey, sampling matters. It has to be national sample. We cannot exactly do 180 million people, even for the political opinion. In the United States, do you know how many people are actually consulted, in the survey? Please look at it. It's a very few. Why? Because how you create the sample, that matters. How did we create our sample? Okay, let me tell you this. First of all, we reached out to 4 nationally recognized human rights organizations to provide a list of individuals who work outside Bangladesh in all 64 districts, except Dhaka, capital Dhaka, not the district, capital Dhaka. Why we excluded capital Dhaka? Because we are going to talk to the national organization which are located in Dhaka, at Dhaka, with 8 nationally recognized, internationally known individuals will be interviewed. They can provide us the perspective. That's why we excluded Dhaka as the capital. We reached out, first of all, 4. Okay? But not all of them. That's not well. We reached out to 42 organizations who are located outside Dhaka as a local human rights organization. 42 of them. That brings us to 46, okay? When they provided that list, based on that, we created a list of, 82 potential interviews. This is where the second methodological question that comes is, how did we defend human rights defenders? While in the spirit, I agree with the National Human Rights Commission's chairman that journalists are human rights defenders, but internationally, by the United Nations, the definition that we have used is plain and simple. The Special Rapporteur of Human Rights Defender defined human rights defendants as, and I quote, literally quoting here, the people who, individually or with others, to promote or protect human rights in peaceful manner. This is the basic minimalist definition that we used. Okay, fine. So that is how we define that. Based on that, based on the selected 84, okay, out of the district of 64 that we requested, please note that we actually, these 4 national human rights organizations do not have people in 64 districts. That's a fact. They have provided their list of the individuals. And here we ran into a problem. In this country nowadays it doesn't matter, because 50 million people's privacy has been breached knowingly. We wanted to make sure that these human rights defenders are protected, because if we gather those and made them public, I cannot, my team cannot, CGS cannot protect them. So if you're asking me, as Bangladesh, some of the Bangladeshi state institutions has raided previously on National Human Rights Office seeking to seize the computers to get the list. That has happened in this country. So if you're asking me, give me that list of names, sorry, I'm not going to give it that list. No, absolutely not. I'm going to protect them until the last moment. Yes, the troublemaker that you called, they are the troublemakers, the good troublemakers, as Senator Lewis, the civil rights movements in the United States. So based on that, we reached out to, now out of these two sources, we used a third source. I'm explaining this methodology because my friends here, the media is here. I understand some of them may go back to office and say that this is a seriously flawed methodology. I'm going to explain it. Sorry for taking time. There is a third method that we have to use, snowballing. Why did we do snowballing? Because when we reached out to these 4 organizations and then plus 46 organizations, did we miss anybody? We might have missed, because there are individual human rights activists who work outside Bangladesh. They might not be part of these 42 organizations or these 4 organizations. Should we exclude them just because they're working independently? No. So we did some snowballing as well. Based on that, 82 potential respondents, we created a list, randomly started selecting based on the district. Out of 64 districts, we had reliable 36 districts where we could actually reach out, identify, verify these individuals. And Mr. Dr. Kamal has mentioned, Kamaluddin Ahmed has mentioned with respect to this one fictitious organization should not delegitimize hundreds of people who are working here. Nevertheless, we have been very careful so that we don't run into that trap. So what did we do? We verified from second independent sources. I, as an individual, have worked in a news organization called British Broadcasting Corporation. Some of you may know which that organization is, for 5 years. So the basic policy is 2 independent sources. One, that they have been provided, we have verified through, because yes, we have found that some of the names that came through, they are no longer active. So based on that, we have created an 82 potential interviews, randomly selected. Okay, these are the confirmed one. Let's go through it, and then we did, randomly selected, ensuring what? Ensuring what? Ensuring that maximum districts are represented so that it is not geographically skewed. Because if you do geographically skewed, you are 36 out of 64. Already we are in sampling, yes, with respect to sampling, are those, when we looked at these 36 districts, sorry for taking, the team, spent hours in this, so I'm not going to take hours of yours, but let me explain. 36 districts that we have looked into. Why 36? Why not 35? Why not 37? Because we were sure that in this 36 districts, verifiably we can say these individuals, our potential respondents, do fit into the UNOHCR's definition, working for either organization or independently. Based on that, 36 districts that stood, based on that, out of 82 potential, we reached out to 82 potential respondents. Okay? 53 of them agreed to participate. 53 of them agreed to participate. Now, if you're looking at the sample, 36 districts, representing organization, individuals, geographically spread through the 8 division, not 7 division, not 6 division, 8 division. Every division have been represented. And out of those 53 people, what happened is this. After that, 5 people declined. We ran into what? 53 minus 5, 48. Right? So what we did, we added 5 out of that list of 82 potential one. Right? We are not simply collecting from, thin air. This is not a pick and choose. This is not a cafeteria that you go and eat whatever you want to like. This is a plain, simple methodological issue, and we did address that. Now, so I hope you understand why 50. 50 is a small number. United States has 300 million people. What is the representative sample, you know? 110 is the max. For US political surveys, 110 is the max that is being used. Anyway, if you do it methodologically, it doesn't have to be every single individual. Now, third methodological question. Why so small number of female? I concur with Advocate Sarah Hussain, it shouldn't be. The list provided by 4 national organizations has very small number of female grassroots human rights defenders. Let me reiterate. The 4 national organizations provided the list which had very small number of grassroots human rights defenders. Now, how do we defend? Now, the next methodological question. How do we define what kind of human rights defenders? Let me give a rundown that what we have looked into. Those people who were involved in addressing the issue of corruption, law enforcement, labor, environment, land and property, indigenous/ethnic minority, religious minorities, migrants and refugees, children, women/gender issue, LGBTQ+, persons with disabilities. We have representation in this 50. Those people who are working or worked with these fields. So, why am I going into these details in this methodology? Because this methodology is the foundation where it stands, okay? So why 50? Who are the defenders? How did we define human rights? One, it is not a 10 years thing. We didn't do a comparison. Sometimes you have to have a friend close to you. Nurul Kabir is a friend of mine, and that's why he defended me. Thank you, Nurul Kabir. And we have our disagreements as well. Whenever we... No. He said he's defending me. No, thank you for that. No, I appreciate that you guys liked it. My point is that these things needs to be clarified so that there's no confusion whatsoever. I don't think that, raising... you have raised the vital question of methodology because as a researcher I understand that it stands on those things. Unless I can clarify that it is actually on the solid basis of the methods, because in social research what we call garbage in, garbage out. If you put the garbage in, then there would be a garbage out. So being in academia, these are the things that we do quite regularly. So this sample representing 36 districts, a division, through a rigorous method that we have come up with, and these are the ones that we did. This is not a comparison of 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. This is a snapshot in that sense. At this point, what is the situation? What would have happened if we had taken what happened for last 50 plus years in Bangladesh? That would be a different study, and I wish someone would do it. I can assure you, this is not something that I intend to do soon. But anyone else, if endeavors, and possibly the Human Rights Organization would do it. But nevertheless, the point is that our situation, our objective in this regard was to say what is the situation now as they see it. If you read the report and if you looked at the presentation that I made initially, I have not inserted my opinion into that. And if I may now, just for a few sentences that are, the entire human rights situation and the human rights question is a political question, period. I agree. I didn't mention it during my presentation because that's not what this report is. This report is about what is the situation now, today, or as it is seen by human rights defenders at the grassroots level, at the national level. That's what we have tried to do, to raise awareness the adversarial relationship, and I tend to agree with Advocate Sarah Hussain that all the laws that have been created over the years had created some positive developments. The laws have been created, many of them are implemented. Why the governments, yes, that is in plural, and the entire state mechanism in Bangladesh seems to take the human rights organization as a hostile thing. I don't get it. I mean, either simply I don't get it because I'm stupid enough not to get it, or something. I don't know why the state would not work with the human rights organization when the people with disabilities are facing such an enormous problem. If you go to any places, I mean, possibly be living in a place called the United States or Europe that I've lived, or somewhere else I've traveled, and most of us have done it here. Most of these houses, buildings doesn't have, disability access. It is a challenge to get into a building, public building, offices where they're supposed to go, which is built with their own tax money. People often say the government has spent. Government has no money. There's no government in the world has money. It is the people's money, public tax. Plain and simple, demand it. Because it's your money, my money. When I'm in the United States, I always challenge the government, saying that you are spending my money. I tell them that you are spending my money. Forget about what, huge budget by Biden administration or Trump. I don't care. The point is, this is my money. I paid taxes and you are spending it, either wasting it in Iraq, doing an unlawful, illegal war, or something else. But the point is this. Why there is adversarial attitude? Why state agencies are being used against the human rights defenders? Because it is political. That is the problem. So, but again, thanks to all. If I have taken, I really appreciate your comments, all of you, because you have taken it seriously. You could have thrown it and said this is nothing, but you have, and as I said at the end of my previous, presentation or beginning, which Dr. Kamaluddin Ahmed has agreed to, and I'm sure Panavai and others would agree to. Let's stand with, borrowing from Nurul Kabir, the troublemakers. That is what we need to do now. That is what is necessary. Thank you again to CGS. Thank you to Zillur for this opportunity.
Respected guests, distinguished speakers and honorable participants, I am Zubaida Hona Farooq, Executive Policy Assistant at Center for Governance Studies. After months of endeavor, we successfully published our report on challenges to human rights defender in Bangladesh. We understand that it might be a different world where human rights does not need defending and can be assured to everyone through good governance, democratic exercise, and global cooperation. But we believe that it is not impossible. We believe that these defenders are the protagonists who keeps us alert regarding the innumerable violation of human rights in the society, and they are the noble people who are working for the service of others without considering for their own safety. But it is our responsibility to provide them with a safe environment where they can raise their voice against an oppressor and stand by a victim. In this report, we have highlighted the conditions that the HRDs of Bangladesh are facing through elaborate literature discussion, extensive fieldwork, and rigorous analysis. We heard the voice of 50 HRDs that work across 36 districts in the country. They shared with us their grief, their stories of pain and oppression, and their demand for protection. We heartily thank those defenders for participating in this research. We also talked to and included several leading human rights activists in Bangladesh in the report so that not only the problems are heard, also the solutions are incorporated. From the deepest of our heart, we thank each individual who has assisted in the data collection, outreach, and communication. Last but not the least, we thank our entire CGS team for relentlessly working for making this work a success. And the person who has been everything in the project guided us with his enlightened knowledge and assistance, which has been a great opportunity for all of us. Dr. Ali Diaz Sir, a distinguished professor at Illinois State University and the member of Advisory Board of CGS. He has not only provided us with guidance to our task, but also inspired us to dedicate our utmost endeavor to the successful completion of this initiative. Finally, we thank you all, specifically the Chairman of NHRC, Dr. Kamaluddin Ahmed, for being present with us in spite of being so sick, as well as the Advocate Zerai Khan Panna, Chairperson of Aino Sarish Kendro, Editor of New Age, Nurul Kobir, and Barrister Sarah Hussain, Honorary Executive Director of BLAST, for being present here at our auspicious moment and extend your cordial support to our endeavor. We hope that our report will extend its contribution to the relevant mechanism in constructing instruments that will look after the defenders of human rights in the country and allow them expansive possibilities of working relentlessly for the people. With that end in view, we are calling an end to our today's publication and presentation ceremony, keeping the hope on note that the human rights defenders will be defended using every possible instrument so that while fighting for the rights of others, their rights don't get forgotten. Ladies and gentlemen, we are ending our today's ceremony, and before that we are humbly requesting you to move to the room outside for some light refreshment. Thank you all very much.